All right, everyone. I've got an amazing guest here today with us, Robbie from Blood Origins. They have an amazing message. If you haven't checked out Blood Origins yet, you definitely should. It's just a great group of individuals that are doing everything they can to help the hunting community throughout the entire globe, not just here in the US. And so this is something that for me is really important for any hunters out there, whether you're a rifle hunter, bow hunter, whatever kind of hunter you are, definitely want to listen into this conversation and go check out what they have going on. But Robbie, who are you and what do you do?
Dang, what a question. Philosophically, who am I? Shit, I don't even know who I am sometimes. And especially today. Today I'm pretty good. I got a good night's sleep last night. Haven't slept at all well in probably 2.5 weeks now, because we've been in South Africa, we've been in Zimbabwe. I got back from Zambia on Thursday, and then I was in Washington State for a fundraiser this weekend. So yeah, who am I? I don't know. Today I'm at home. I am very much looking forward to the Christmas holidays. We're in a new state. We're in a new home. That's about 15 minutes from the in-laws. So for the first time since we've had kids, really, we're going to be able to have Santa, Father Christmas, come to our house on Christmas Day. My wife's already got me the matching pajamas that I have to wear with everyone else. So yeah, man, that's who I am.
You sure that wasn't your plan, the matching PJs?
Could be. But a lot of people don't know a lot of things about me. Now you just exposed it, Jonathan. Thank you. My reputation just went down the drain. Yeah, it's funny, that whole thing. Like that's not a South African thing. Like we never had like matching PJs as kids or anything like that. It's yeah. So I again, back to the question, who am I? A lot of people don't get to see the personal side of me. We try to, because Blood Origins isn't about me. But I've heard a lot of people say that they want to see a little bit more about me. They want to see a little bit more about this guy that pushes the message for hunters around the world, and we do. I'll start doing a little bit more of that, but really, I just, from a Blood Origins perspective, the opportunities that America provides you from a hunting perspective, a hunting lifestyle choice, is unheard of anywhere else in the world. And I'm privileged enough to be an American citizen now, and being privileged enough to raise my two boys in this lifestyle. And I've been in a place where that lifestyle is non-existent, doesn't exist anymore. And so I'm going to fight until my nail beds are bleeding for our lifestyle to continue. And really what that means, specifically from my perspective and Blood Origins perspective, is about changing perceptions. Because in the social media world that we live in today, perceptions is 9/10 of reality. And if there's nobody else pushing message around perceptions, then we're just going to keep being perceived the way that we've been perceived for the last 20 to 30 years, which is we're just bloodlusting killers, and which is understandable, again, because that's all they see. All they see is killing, and Outdoor Channel and Sportsman's Channel is all about killing, and that's okay. Don't get me wrong. People don't jump on me and say, you're against it. No, hunting, you hunt because we like to kill things. Or not we like to. We hunt because we kill things. It's different than between hunting and hiking. And the Sportsman's Channel and Outdoor Channel and all that kind of stuff is geared towards hunters. Hunters, that's what we do. We like that. But the non-hunting majority, when they're like, well, let me see what a hunter is like, or let me see what hunting does. Where do they get that information to really understand that? They get it from the Outdoor Channel and the Sportsman's Channel, and it's a skewed misperception of who we are as hunters and hunting. So that's who I am. That's what Blood Origins does. We're a non-profit, 501c3 non-profit that really is just simply interested in conveying the truth about hunting all around the world, from different peoples and their different walks and their different backgrounds. So yeah, long-winded answer to a very simple question.
No, it's a lot that we're going to delve into here, and I appreciate you sharing that, because it's really what I can't remember exactly where I heard of you guys first. I want to say it was through just a friend of mine, and then I heard you on the Stealthy Hunter podcast.
Okay.
with Hillary, I believe.
Yep. Yeah. Hillary
And
Lampers.
and I just, there's so many, there's good organizations that actually, put out and fight, like what you were saying, just fighting for the lifestyle that we have, the privileges, because as much as we want to say it's a right, it's really not a right to go out and hunt, unfortunately. I
Correct.
think that should have been in the Constitution because that's a way to provide for your family, but it wasn't. So it is a privilege that we have to fight for. And there's good and bad organizations, and you guys are one of the good ones that are actually out there putting out good information and fighting for us as hunters. And so, and I agree with what you say as well. Sometimes people say harvest, sometimes people say kill, but you are taking the life of an animal, and that animal is providing food for you and your family. But also at the same time, there's a lot more to it than just the kill shot. And I agree that, Sportsman's Channel and everything else that caters to hunters, it's kind of at the top of the Google list when people Google hunters, or they look it up on YouTube, which are kind of the top two places they'd look it up. And that can get a bad reputation. So I love what you're spreading. I can't imagine the information that you have to absorb, because I barely know all the laws. I know enough of the laws in Utah to not get in trouble with DWR, but you have to know them for all the states, all the countries that you go into. And it blows my mind, the amount of information that you have to understand so that you can speak educationally with these representatives in different areas of the world. How do you tackle that? How do you go about researching that information and maintaining it in your mind?
Yeah, I think the fact that, so I have a PhD in wetland ecology. And so my background is academia, right? That's what I've built my career on and built 20 years of work around. So research essentially is, dare I say, it's in my blood, just like hunting is in our blood. Research is just a part of like how I'm made up. And so just absorbing information, knowing how to absorb information, knowing where to cherry pick information from, validate it, verify it, is something that I'm really good at. And so that is certainly a help in the Blood Origins realm. Yeah, it's a pretty scary task every day. You wake up, my phone wakes up, hunting is going on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, everywhere around the world. So it's really a 24/7 job, because when you're going to sleep, Australia's awake, New Zealand's awake, that side of the world is awake. So I'll wake up to, I don't know, 250 WhatsApp messages. WhatsApp, I don't know if you ever use WhatsApp. Americans aren't very used to WhatsApp, but the rest of the world is a WhatsApp like crazy place. Yeah. 250 WhatsApp messages. I don't know how many DMs. I don't know how many tags into posts we wake up to. And so and the other thing then you've got to recognize is, like, what do you tackle and what don't you tackle? Or what do you ignore versus what do you wait on? And that's a learning curve, right? So there's issues that, like, for instance, I think we've had a couple of people sort of jump on us a little bit lately in the last 3 to 4 weeks because we haven't said anything about the Canadian gun ban. Nothing publicly. Well, number one, I was in Zambia for 3 weeks with absolutely zero service. So I'm like, well, I can't really do anything. And number two, I'm just not, that's the situation to your point. I'm not familiar with Canadian politics very well. I don't understand the process of how it gets put in place. And like, how would I influence something? Like, is there something that I can do? And really, at the end of the day, right now, there's not much I can do. And what's being championed really now that I saw today was the MPs from the members of parliament from all parties are now starting to stand up and say, no, this is crazy. This is ridiculous. Which those are the guys, those are the powerful voices. So we just really have to champion those guys. We need to just say thank you to those guys. And that's probably what we're going to do, which is the waiting game, right? I wouldn't have been able to do that if I put out a talking head about the Canadian gun issue 3 weeks ago. It would have been a completely different message than I would put out today. And I think today's message would be a much stronger message than it was 3 weeks ago, because now we know the people that are fighting for us that may not even, there are people that are non-hunters fighting for hunting rifles. That's a better message. So it's all about timing and a little bit of fortuitousness, a little bit of luck. But yeah, research is I like research. I like topics. I like understanding them. And then the other thing that really helps me is I have a knack of being able to translate information to whatever level I need to translate it to, whether I'm talking to politicians, whether I'm talking to academics, whether I'm talking to biologists, or whether I'm talking to the general public. I can seep that message in terms of its understanding and complexity to whatever audience I'm sort of sending the message to.
I like that. Yeah, and I bet your accent helps with that, because it draws the attention of the normal folks, and then you sound more sophisticated when you go and talk to the politicians and the businessmen. So it's I bet that's man, that I can't imagine having to deal with, again, that wealth of knowledge, and then when you don't understand something, then you have to dive into it, then you have to play the waiting game sometimes. And when people want that instant gratification, that turnaround, it's just like the majority of things nowadays, people want an instant answer. And there's not always an instant answer. Like in this case, what you were saying, where you have to do that research. You don't want to speak out of turn and, give, whether it be Blood Origins or yourself or the hunting community, a bad name by saying something without having the education behind it. But at the same time, you also want to show that you are supporting the hunting community up in Canada. So that's a tough spot to be in, man.
Yeah, it is what it is. You've got to get, every day you develop a little thicker of a skin in terms of people. Like today, and the way that we approach it is everyone has the right to their opinion. Okay. When people support us and they give us money, they feel like they're like, hey, now I have, I'm going to tell you what you need to do. And that's fine too. I appreciate that and I understand that. And that's really how we approach things. Like today we dropped a reel. We've got a story coming out. I don't know when this podcast will come out, but in December we have a story of an African-American family in Portland, Oregon. And the fact that they're African-Americans is part of the story. Well, we had an African-American guy who follows us respond to us today on the reel saying, I'm pretty much always in your corner, Robbie, but this one is off the mark and is distasteful and is disparaging or something like that. And my response to him was, appreciate the comment, appreciate your support, and appreciate your opinion. And we're not going to hit it for everyone on the mark every single time. And we're all about changing perceptions around who hunters are. And there is a perception that African Americans aren't strong. There's not a strong community of hunters in African American. And that's what we're highlighting. But if you felt like it was distasteful and disparaging, okay, no problems. I appreciate your opinion. I appreciate your perspective. And I think just that, the way that we interact with someone like that is what we're getting, is what we're known for. Is that we don't, a lot of people in that specific example would have been like, oh, screw you, this is what it's like, and this, I can do whatever I want. And honestly, that's the problem with the hunting community, is that we have this attitude that, well, we can do what we want, and I don't care what you say, I'm going to do it. Versus like, oh, thank you for your opinion, or be very gentlemanly, or be respectful, or you don't know where that guy's coming from. Maybe he's having a crappy day. That's just social media, man. And you just got to take your licks. You got to take your, when people say different things, and just remember, it's not personal. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I don't take it personally. And yeah, that's it.
No, definitely. That's a good way to handle things. And it's been mentioned, by you and a lot of people that I would consider kind of leading the fight, or people that are also in the fight as well, that there's a lot of infighting when it comes to the hunting community. And that's really unfortunate, because we're already getting attacked enough as it is by people outside of the community. And to be 100% honest with you, I feel like, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but a lot of the things that are coming from, whether it be PETA or other organizations like that, or politicians, is from lack of understanding. That's the difference between, ignorance and stupidity, right? They're ignorant on the topic. And so they see these fluffy, cute bears, like Winnie the Pooh, and they're like, oh, well, why would you want to hunt them? Why would you want to shoot a mountain lion? Why would, and then you get issues like in New Jersey, which, luckily they've kind of reversed that and they've started the hunting back up on the bears, but where kids couldn't go out to their school bus because these giant coastal bears were literally fighting during their rut in someone's front yard, knocking over trash cans, destroying property, and these kids couldn't get to their school bus because, well, they're going to get eaten or torn up, in the middle of this. So I think it's got a lot to do with the lack of understanding the hunting community. And instead of thinking of people as, I don't know, where I'm from, North Carolina, you get the backcountry hicks that are flying the rebel flag. That's what people think of as hunters. And that's not really what the hunting community is about. And so again, I love that you approach it in a very educational manner, and you show different stories like the one that you shared recently, and all the other ones that you've shared that are hitting different communities so that you can bring people in instead of fighting against each other, and just playing nice, basically in the same sandbox.
Yeah, I think the miseducation of the Peters and the HSUSs of the world, I don't think it's a miseducation. I think it's an ignorance issue. I think that they are, they're a non-profit fundraising machine that is all about raising money, and they'll never, ever, ever be for anything tied to hunting, regardless of how much science you have. Never. So really, in that regard, it's us putting out information to change the understanding of their communities, not them themselves, and really educate the people that are, they support Peter and HSUS for the good work that they do, and that's great. But when they start sort of delving into this realm, providing information that they can, more of the people that are just logical, because there's a lot of people out there that read what we say, or read or watch a video or see our content. They're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, what he's saying. In terms of the infighting in the community, I don't know if we'll ever get over it. I think that I have a hypothesis that, hunting is so ingrained DNA wise in our blood from way back that there's inherently a competition component tied to hunting, right? That guy back in the caveman days drug the deer back to the fire, was looked upon with high esteem by the village, and got the best woman that night, and got the best treats that night, and all the other hunters around the fire were like, oh, I want to be that guy, and sort of a competitive spirit started from there. And instead of in today's society, dogging him or getting down on him and telling him, well, he did it this way, he shouldn't have done it that way, they just went out the next day and tried to be better. So I think inherently there's competition in a hunting society. Then the other thing is, I think that all the infighting that we have comes down to two things. Number one, it comes down to jealousy. Sometimes a lot of people are jealous of certain things, that they want that, and because they can't have it, they will be disparaging around that thing, whatever it is. And secondly, I think people, just based on how they're raised, their culture and their background, have a certain viewpoint, and that viewpoint is a preference viewpoint. It's not ethics. It's just a viewpoint on how things are to be done. It's just like anything, right? Your dad taught you that this is how you mix concrete. I don't know how you were taught to mix concrete, but I was taught to make a big, we had a big board. You put the sand, you put the mix, you put the concrete, and you mixed it up. Then you spread it out. And then you made a little hole in the middle, and you made like a moat, and you poured the water into the moat, and you folded it in from the outside in. I guarantee you, people who mix concrete are yelling at me right now, because that's not how you're supposed to mix concrete. And the only reason they're yelling at me is because they were taught differently. But we're doing the same thing. It's the same thing with hunting, is that you just have a personal preference based on your culture and your background and how you were raised. And so when you see someone doing something different to what you are, you have a differing of opinion, and you add social media, that removes the context by which you're making that comment turns into infighting.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because it really is just something that some people don't even have a reason why they can't think of it off the top of their head, but I think it's because it's ingrained in them from such a young age that in all reality, they're fighting because that's all they know. And, it's just like bow hunters, rifle hunters, muzzleloaders, deer hunters, elk hunters. Like, there's so many groups that you can put yourself into that, it's just like being an American. Everyone wants to have their own Democrat, Republican, etc. Like, for some reason, there's this strong feeling of you have to be part of a even more small and, I guess, divisive group. And I personally don't agree with that, because I'm able to take a step back and see, I may not prefer rifle hunting right now, but as long as you do it ethically and you're not going out and just mowing down animals, like, you're following the laws, and you're harvesting the animal, or you're killing the animal in an ethical way. I'm like, I don't care what weapon you use as long as it's legal. And I just prefer bow hunting because XYZ reason. I'm able to have those conversations, whereas some people would be like, oh, well, a bow won't kill the animal as ethically as a rifle, and you have to use this certain they even break it down to what caliber hunter. It's just it makes me kind of chuckle a little bit, because I'm like, what does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
Exactly.
And the whole you mentioned it twice already, so I'm going to bring it up. The whole kill versus harvest nomenclature and terminology. A lot of people have said, well, you're bending the truth when you say harvest versus kill. You're not being honest to who you are as a hunter. Guys, at the end of the day, it's both. Okay? It's both. Because once you've killed that animal, what do you do to the meat on that animal? You don't kill the meat. You harvest the meat. You're taking the meat off the thing, just like you would take a crop. So you're harvesting that meat. So it's both. You're both right. No one's wrong. So what are we arguing about here, people?
Just for the sake of arguing.
Yeah. Excuse my language.
Yeah, no, it's true though. It really is. It reminds me of my kids. I leave my two youngest kids together and they can play great. And then all of a sudden something sparks an argument, and then they just dig their heels in. No, my way's the right way. No, my way's the right way. And it's like, well, you're both kind of right. Like,
Right.
What does it matter? Why fight about it? You're like children. So yeah, no, I definitely understand that. And that's why, again, I love the way that you and Blood Origins puts out the messages that you do, because it is very understandable for non-hunters, for hunters, and for each and every group of hunters out there. And like you also mentioned, you're not going to hit every single group every single time, but with how many messages you are putting out there and the way you're putting out, you're consistent with the way you put it out. Just each message is going to hit a different group of people and hopefully bring them in to the conversation rather than making them feel like they're on the fringes. So,
yeah, 100%. And I'm not the smartest individual when it comes to marketing, because if you look at our marketing strategy, it's probably the worst marketing strategy in the world, in that instead of like creating this audience, this tight little audience, and really being that, we, as you said, we create content that hits a diversity of markets, right? We create an episode about a New Zealander who's into habitat restoration. Well, of the spectrum of hunters, it's probably only going to appeal to 5% of hunters. You put a duck hunting episode out there, it's only going to appeal to the 15% of the duck hunters. You put a whitetail episode of T-Bone, Travis Turner may hit the southeastern market from a whitetail hunting perspective. So yeah, we're creating content that, again, is not actually geared for hunters. It's geared for the non-hunting majority, so that when someone says, well, this is the perception of hunters, or this is what we think, people already are ready to say, why don't you just go check out these guys? And there's 70 pieces of content already, ready for them to absorb. It's not one piece of content or two pieces of content. There's 70 pieces, all from all around the world, from all walks of life, from all diversities, from all genders. Just have at it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I wouldn't say that that's terrible. Well, it depends on what you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to sell to a particular market, then I'd say maybe that's not the best marketing strategy. But
Oh,
with the
thanks,
message that you guys
Jonathan.
bring,
Jeez.
with the message that
Stinger.
you guys bring, the fact that, you're a nonprofit and you're literally fighting all over the world for these things, I would say you guys have hit it on the head because you guys are consistent at the way you put the message out there. It may not be the same. I'd even say it is the same message. It's just geared towards different groups of people, but it's the same message, and you're consistent with that. So I definitely would say that's a great way to do what you guys are aiming to do. So I'm a little interested actually. How did you even? I mean, I'm kind of assuming I know why, but I don't want to assume because you know what assuming does. And why did you start this? Why Blood Origins? Kind of give us a little bit of background there as to, I mean, what does it mean to you? Why did you start it?
Yeah, I only started hunting when I came to the States. So I was 26 years old when I started hunting. Um, you know, late in my career, started gaining a little bit more financial resources, being able to hunt more, expand my hunting opportunities, had two boys. And we had moved to the coast of Mississippi, and I started rereading. My grandfather's a prolific storyteller. He typewrote a bunch of stories. He wrote a lot of things, and he enjoyed that medium of storytelling. And I started rereading his stories. I reread Old Man and the Boy by Robert Ruark. I don't know if you've ever heard of Robert Ruark and that specific book, but it's all about Southeastern hunting. And I read it when I was 16 years old, and I reread it. And my grandfather had inscribed all the way through it. It's a beautiful book that, I'll give to my kids one day. And I was like, man, this is cool. This is, I think I should, we could tell the story of hunters so much better. And again, at the time, I was also thinking more about why I hunted. I've got the biology to like why we would hunt. And I could tell my boys, like, we're trapping raccoons and possums because they're nest predators, and we want to increase quail and turkey populations on this property. But I couldn't get into a deeper like why behind it. And when I looked online or I looked on Outdoor Channel, Sportsman's Channel, I couldn't find the why either. So I was like, well, why not build it? And then I also obviously at the time thought, well, if I built it, could I create like a hunting show with it, like that we just focus on these individuals? And so I had an idea of what I wanted it to look like. I'm a pretty creative person. I know how I wanted it to feel. And so we created a couple of pilots. And being the consistent individual I am, I would call it patiently persistent individual. That I just had this dogged determination of like, I just wanted to keep telling stories. And I did the whole like reach out to people, reach out to companies. Hey, I'm doing this. And would you like to sponsor us, or whatever that was back then, in the hunting arena? And luckily everyone told me no. They didn't quite say no. They're just like, oh, we like what you're doing. Keep doing it. Just the typical stuff like you've probably encountered. And little did I know that there were like 1,000 other people like me pitching their own hunting shows. And little did I know how much ego was involved in the hunting industry at the time. I was completely nascent to anything and naive to, what was transpiring around in the hunting community. And I just kept doing it. And I remember Jim Shockey said to me, he was like, I couldn't believe that you kept emailing me. You kept sending me new content. You kept saying, this is what I'm doing. Hey, look at this, look at this, look at that. And so for 3 years, we just became this almost like independent, authentic look at hunters. That's what we focus on. That's our bread and butter. It's still our core foundational piece today. And then my wife said, well, look, I appreciate your passion, but I want my savings account back, because we weren't getting any money in and I was just pumping money out because
been there too, man.
and I said, and the reason being is that I needed to have content that was of the highest quality to differentiate myself from everybody else. And so that's when we decided to look around and what other models could we explore. And the model that fit us best was a non-profit model. And at the turn of COVID, we turned ourselves into a non-profit. Probably the worst time to turn ourselves into a non-profit, but the best time in terms of who we were and our message and people knowing about us, right? We weren't turning ourselves into a non-profit at the beginning when everyone was like, who the hell are these guys? We're not going to give them money. You know, we turned ourselves into a non-profit when everyone was like, oh, these guys know what they're doing. And then it also allowed us to expand our content versus from just the episodes of hunters to now getting into documentaries, now getting into talking heads, now getting into infographics, now getting sort of, as you said, becoming the spear tip of, and because we're so small and so nimble, we don't have any bureaucracy tied to us. We can pivot on a dime and go tackle this or tackle that or whatnot. So that's how Blood Origins was created, man. And it's just going from strength to strength nowadays. And 2023 is, you know, obviously just around the corner, but we've got some phenomenal, much bigger pieces of content coming. Not just, and when I say bigger, I mean more complex, more, you know, harder hitting stories from all over the world. And we've got some big filming to be done in 2023, which will lead into much bigger stories in 2024. So yeah, it's exciting.
That's amazing. I love that. You know, it's probably a blessing in disguise that you got a lot of no's, because then you could take it in the route that you want.
We didn't belong to anyone. We belong to everyone. That's what I said. We do not, Blood Origins doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to everyone. And so my grand plan is hopefully to have, you know, 5 camera companies all on the same line supporting us with the same amount of money. And, you know, we wear what we want, right? I like Kuyu. Kuyu's been a good supporter of ours in the past. Hopefully we can get him back. I like Kuyu, but I also have Sitka stuff. I also have First Light stuff. I also have Numa stuff. I also, you know, and we wear what we want to wear. So.
Exactly. Yep. No, and that's awesome to hear that you didn't give up, because it's just like anything else with businesses, but people generally tend to give up after being told no multiple times. And I love that Jim Shockey pointed that out to you, that he couldn't believe that you kept emailing. You know, and I always say that for me personally, that's something that I can be accused of. I'm not much of anything except for consistent and persistent, you know, and that amounts to a lot, because, you know, even with your PhD, which takes, I mean, in and of itself, that shows your persistence and your consistency, getting a PhD, you know, and it's amazing to me to hear that kind of story, rather than just, it's cool to hear people that blow up overnight, but it's awesome to hear that you worked your tail off. And then also the real story behind the scenes, where your wife's like, okay, when's this gonna no longer be a hobby? Like, you know, because I've had that same discussion too, and I definitely understand that. So I think what you guys are doing honestly is amazing. And I'm excited to see what you guys have coming. Isn't it crazy to think that 2 years ago was when you officially started everything? I mean, it's 2 years.
No, 5 years ago. 5 years ago is when we first dropped our first piece of content. Okay, so for 3 years, we just were tied to people. Literally for 3 years, that's all we did. 2 years ago is when we like blew up the sort of the pipeline in terms of like, what do we say? What can we say? What can our message be more of, more around?
And you were saying 2020 may not have been a good year. I would disagree with you on that, just from seeing the growth of how many hunters have come in because they're trying to get outside, because they're so tired of being so closed in, and you guys being that great opportunity to learn more in an educated way, rather than just Sportsman's Channel or wherever they would go to watch the content, getting that education along with it, because that is, there was such an influx of people that got into the outdoors industry due to COVID, due to the lockdowns, due to the whole 2020 thing. So I think that was actually pretty smart. You might not have realized it at the time or felt that way, but
I think maybe from an audience perspective, you're right. But I think what I was talking more to is the financial.
Oh, well, yeah, that's definitely, I can definitely hear you on that one.
People were tightening purse strings and not knowing what was going on in the world. And
Hmm.
so, but
Exactly.
it worked out. Again, it worked out completely in our favor. And yeah, we're just going strength to strength now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you grew up, well, you didn't grow up hunting. You were adult onset hunter, kind of like me. And when you were, 26, you started hunting. And then I love the idea that the question of why, which we can get so frustrated about as parents sometimes, I've actually kind of turned that around and realized that that's another blessing in disguise, that your kids ask you why so much. It can get frustrating when you don't have an hour to explain the reason why, but in all reality, it's good to delve into it even deeper, which is what kind of took you down that rabbit hole of just the question why. Why do we do what we do? And I would just like to know why, obviously coming to the US as an adult, you've lived throughout the globe, but why not just focus on the US or even just one state? Why did you decide to go global and take it that way?
I don't think we ever had the intent. It was almost just like it naturally happened. And there were just opportunities to tell. We went to Denmark, and I think it was like January of 18, and got a couple of stories out of them, and they were a little international flavored. And I think what set us on the trajectory of the international was in June of 2020. Yeah, it was June. The whole situation with tar in New Zealand came to a head. And it was like the first thing that we were the front runners on. We had contacts on the ground in New Zealand. They sent us information 3 days before the decision was going to be made. I had big NGOs here in the United States calling me saying, do you have this draft operational plan? And I was a South African that had just started a small nonprofit in Mississippi, and I had the draft operational plan and they didn't. I was like, what? How does that work? And it's just because people trusted us and they trusted who we were and what we were going to say. And we dropped that video. I think it was called like Tarmageddon 2.0 or something like that. And it got like 200,000 views on Instagram and had 250,000 views on Facebook. And it was almost like this, like, wow, we never knew we had this kind of like voice. And that's what sort of started it. And I think then people just started pinging us with things happening around the world. And we just got more and more clued in with, we almost have like this little underground network that don't work for us, but just are communities that are people that like us, that like what we do. And if anything comes across their feed or their social or something's happening, we get a DM or we get pinged into a post or something like that. So yeah, it's I think it's important that we were global. I think that there's enough bandwidth for us to be global. And I think there was a needed voice on the global stage, essentially.
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely understand that. And I'd kind of forgotten about that. As far as the tar in New Zealand, because they're an invasive species, correct? Is that, and maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, how many hours do you have on this podcast?
Okay. Well, basically they were saying no more hunting tar, right?
They are an introduced species.
That's what. Okay.
I would classify like pigs as an invasive species, possums as an invasive species down there. Rats, stoats are feral invasive species. Tar, I would say, is a game resource in New Zealand. Yes, they're not native. No mammals are native to New Zealand. So everything that is mammal is non-native, is invasive. But they're a game resource. They've been there since, they've been there for 50 years. They're going to be there they're never going to get eradicated. And they drive an industry that has significant economic GDP in New Zealand. With a sustainable management system in place that will protect New Zealand's native, specifically flora, in the TARS scenario. So yeah, there was just a controversy of like how many tar they were going to try and kill, and there was a department. There was the Department of Conservation New Zealand at the time was again It's all politics. You've seen this happen everywhere around the world. The conservation commissioner, or the member of parliament that was in charge of the Department of Conservation, was brought in from the outside by the government that was in charge, and she was the leader of what they called Forest and Bird, which essentially is the PETA of New Zealand.
Yeah. So. No, that's yeah. And again, it's just decisions being made by people that they're not.
No, they have an agenda. It's not.
Yeah.
You're about to say they're miseducated. It's not. They're not miseducated. They just have a different agenda.
Digging their heels in, not willing to learn, not wanting to. Gotcha.
Not wanting to.
Yeah. Not wanting. Yeah, I guess that's a big key as well. Okay. Well, that's, man, I can't remember that, or I can't believe that was 2 years ago, because I remember that being a big thing, and I remember following you guys' stuff, about that, and man, I can't. Wow.
Yeah, that was our first project, because our first project as a nonprofit that happened, and I was like, I need to raise money because we had this great idea. Let's fly non-hunters and a vegan into the backcountry of New Zealand and show them tar for the first time. And those non-hunters, let's feed them tar stew while sitting in a hut in the backcountry of New Zealand.
Yeah.
And we did it. That was the first project we ever did. It was the first. We helicoptered in all these people. I was like, I can't believe I'm not there. I'm paying for this, and I'm sending freaking non-hunters, helicoptering them into the backcountry of New Zealand, this magnificent landscape. And it was a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant little film.
That's amazing. So
yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that. I really do remember that being probably the first thing that introduced me to you, now that I think about it. Because that was a big deal. I just remember, like, in my mind, what I can remember from the situation was basically they were talking about no more hunting tar. They were going to fly helicopters in basically and just kill all the tar, which anyway, that just didn't make sense to me. Why not allow people to provide for like we were saying, the GDP of going out? People are willing to pay good money to go to New Zealand and hunt these tar and provide for New Zealand, but at the same time have the experience that they're looking for. Anyway, we could go, like you were saying, we can go on for hours about that. I would like to just talk a little bit about, the idea that you guys, man, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. But what would be a project that at this point has allowed you to feel, I guess, most fulfilled? Is that a good question? Because you've had so many.
No, I think they're all just amazing, man. It's almost like when you're able to tap into like the humanitarian side of things and what hunters do from a humanitarian side of things, then that's always going to be like top of the line from a humanitarian perspective. Sure, conservation projects are great. The Arkansas black bear project from a collaring perspective was great. But like providing 20 grand to Hunters for the Hungry program in Wyoming, that is really impactful, right? Literally coming out of Zambia, I'll give you an example fresh off my mind that we're going to raise some money hopefully in 23 for, is we walked in a rural village in Zambia of a place that these people have forgotten. This place is actually is colloquially named the Forgotten Zambezi. It's a part of the river that nobody knows about. These villages were relocated to this area because of Lake Kariba flooding up in the 50s. And they've recently just got a clinic built, but the clinic can't be staffed because there's no staff accommodation. So these guys can't even come in. They'll come in for like a day every 3 months or 4 months. And so we walked the foundations of these new accommodation buildings that had been dug. But there were trees 8 foot tall, 10 foot tall in the foundations already. They were dug a year and a half ago, and there's no money to build them. There's no money to build the houses. And I was like, well, can we raise the money to build those houses? Can hunters raise money to support this forgotten place that everyone's forgotten about? And so that'll be very, very meaningful. But I think, it's just, again, each project has its own little piece to it, right? That its own little, like, oh, that's cool about that project. Oh, that's cool about that project. Oh, we're funding, the culling of some animals to feed a local rural kid hostel in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. That just, and we went there and we saw the kids eating, and we saw the building, and we saw the conditions, and we saw the woman cooking the meats and whatnot. And yeah, it's, but we're always looking for projects. So if people listening to this podcast have ideas of things that we can get involved with that, may need, we're funding from, $5,000 range all the way through to a $30,000 range right now. And starting to get into the $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 range moving forward. So we're just interested in, and look, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that nobody else is doing this work. There's lots and lots of people doing great conservation work. I think though the problem is we all forget how to showcase that message, showcase the work that we're doing. And that's what Blood Ordinance is built for, is showcasing the message, showcasing the good work that we do as hunters to change perceptions again of what hunting does for people, for wildlife, for communities.
And that's the thing too, is a lot of people, and a lot of people that, have charity organizations or are doing these great things also don't want to come off as bragging, because it's that same kind of the heart that you have. You also don't want to show that you're doing all these great things like, oh, look at me. The way you guys present your projects, it isn't, and I love what you said earlier about you're not beholden to one company or one thing. It's everyone's project. And so, yes, you may be leading it, and you and your team and everyone at Blood Origins, but at the same time, it's involving everyone. So the way you're able to present it isn't, hey, look at me, look at what I did. It's look at what we all have done. Exactly. And that encourages more people wanting to help, donate time, whatever it is that they can give. And I think that's very unique. Because, like you said, there's a lot of groups out there doing good things. They just don't know how to shine the light on it without looking cocky in a way, which obviously they don't want to do because they're charity organizations. So I guess this is kind of a bigger question too, as why at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that the U.S. has a lot of opportunities for hunting that isn't seen throughout the world. I wanted to touch on that before I let you go here, because I know you've got a hard stop coming up here. So touch on that a little bit as to what do you mean by that? Because people may not, people may grow up whitetail hunting where they can get 6-7 deer in a year, and they don't understand that how big of a privilege that is compared to other states or even other nations in the globe. So what did you mean by that when you said that?
I think you can couch it in sort of three pieces. I'll start with the first one, is that the way that America is built, constitution-wise, as well as the public land system that is in America, allows two things to happen. Point number one, is that you have the right to own guns. And so when you walk out your back door, like I walk out my back door here and drive 20 minutes down the road and get into a forest, I can walk with a loaded weapon in that forest and be completely legal. That may happen in Canada. I do not know of another place. It may happen in Australia if you're legal, but you have to be a legal gun owner. And there's some nuance there, but it doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Like, you just can't do that on public land, on state lands, on lands that anyone can be on, and that it's completely legal. Two, the second point is the public lands. Like, there's not much public land available to do the activity that you're interested in doing. So in South Africa, yes, we have a lot of national parks, but you can't walk. It's not like Yellowstone. Like, you can't leave your vehicle. You can't just go hunt them. If it is more open that you can go hiking in, like Drakensberg, there's a big mountain range in South Africa that you can go hiking in. Can't take a gun and you can't hunt it. So there's no place. There's some public land hunting in Australia. There's a lot of public land hunting in New Zealand. New Zealand is pretty much the closest model that you can get to America. But there's nowhere else in the world can you just show up with your gun have all the little legalities checked, and go hunt public state-owned land. Very, very unique that America has that. And then thirdly, I think it's the ability for, and that's tied to the North American wildlife model, that the public and that the resource belongs to the state, the resource belongs to the people of the United States. It is a different wildlife management model than, say, South Africa and other places, because South African wildlife model is the wildlife belongs to you, the person. If it's on your land and you fence it, it belongs to you. That has its benefits. The public land system has its benefits. They both have their downfalls too, but they both are probably the two models for wildlife conservation that are touted around the world to show what can be done. Elk, pronghorn, whitetail, turkey, ducks have all seen significant increases because of the public land system, because of the North American wildlife model. South Africa, the same thing. South Africa's head of wildlife, when I say heads, amount of wildlife that South Africa had in the 70s was like 500,000, 600,000 head of wildlife. Today, it's between 20 to 26 million because of the privatization of wildlife, to show that they had value over other land uses. Here in the United States, you don't have that because you don't need a value system to be greater. There is no system greater than the public land system here in the United States. So
Gotcha.
When I say the privilege of what you have here in the United States is almost lost on people, is that you don't know anything else. You don't know a system that has no public land. You don't know a system that you don't have the ability to legally own a gun and go utilize that gun. And the wildlife is also tremendous in terms of its density. So those are the 3 points, just to sort of say this is why, the privilege that America is and has, you don't want to lose it. And so that's why you fight for it. Exactly.
And that's kind of what I wanted to get across to people, that they understand. Cause I do understand that the other model, is it technically called the South African model?
No, it doesn't have a name. It's just a privatization of wildlife. And it's a model that exists in America as well. Yeah. But it is the primary model in South Africa for wildlife conservation.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, is that more of a lot of people may know it as pay to play? Is that kind of, no, it's not quite that.
Not really. I would always couch it as a value. So if you're a landowner in South Africa and the wildlife didn't belong to you, and you would be dictated by government in terms of regulations tied to that wildlife, which is the fight that's happening in New Mexico right now in terms of the E+ system and elk tags and whatnots.
Yep.
Well, why would I value the wildlife? Same thing as New Mexico. New Mexico private landowners are like, if you take away E+, if you take away the fact that I can get an elk tag on my private property, why would I care for the wildlife? Why would I care for the elk on my property?
Yep.
Same thing in South Africa. Now that I own the wildlife, yes, to the exclusion of others, but I now have a fiscal responsibility. I now have a moral responsibility to look after that wildlife. And so I have to put money into that wildlife. And yes, it so happens that wildlife is valuable from photographic tourism, ecotourism, hunting, game management, venison sales, and it's more profitable, more valuable than an alternative land use, which would be row crop agriculture or cattle or beef or goats or something else.
Gotcha. Cool. I think those are really good. Really, obviously you've done talking points before.
But I've done a couple of podcasts. Yeah.
It's almost like you've done this before. Yeah. No, in all reality, I think that's a really good and simplified way. And I think you really do have that talent of being able to shift from audience to audience and explaining it in a way that's understandable for people. And you're very approachable as far as like being able to, communicate with people. People don't feel, at least from what I can see, they don't feel ridiculed by you and your answers. That's a big thing too. You know, people don't like asking questions if they feel like they're going to get smacked in the
100%.
face with the answer, you know? So
100%.
yeah, that I definitely appreciate that. Well, is there anything, as we wrap it up here, is there anything that you want to leave with the audience that we haven't touched on? I know there's a billion things that you've got going on, and there's so many things I want to ask from you, but you know, short of sending people your way, what would you like to say to the audience or leave them with as we wrap it up here?
A couple of things. Number one, if you are in the spirit of giving, we are a nonprofit, we are a fundraising organization, and we need funds to keep doing what we're doing every single day. If you have a company that is looking for a tax-deductible donation, we have a conservation club. And honestly, one of my challenges for myself in 2023 is I want the Joe Blow companies involved in our conservation club. I love hunting industry partners, of course, but I'd love to have the tile guy, the electrician, the plumber, those companies that are like, man, I'm a hunter. I like what you do. I want my plumbing company associated with what you do. So if you have one, reach out to us, please. We're absolutely interested to have a conversation. Number two, I'll leave you with that. If you want to change perceptions around hunting, all you need to do is think. It's the simplest thing that you can do. Think before you post. Think before you pull the trigger. Think before you comment. Think before you respond. If you just do a little bit of thinking, or give it 24 hours, some people like to just I'll give it a 24-hour rest period. I'm telling you what, the perceptions around who you are will change overnight. So that's it, man. Keep fighting the fight. Thank you. I much appreciate the opportunity. I apologize that I have the hard stop here.
No, you're good. You're good.
But appreciate the opportunity. I'm always humbled when people ask, like, hey, would you like to come on my podcast? And whether you've got an audience of 2 or 2 million, it doesn't matter to me. Just appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and this definitely won't be the last time, as long as you accept another invitation in the future.
I'll do it. No problem.
Yeah, so guys, go follow Blood Origins. I'll leave the links all down below so you can go donate, and you can go follow what they're doing, what their projects are. Thanks again, Robbie, for being on. I really appreciate it. And guys, as I always say, get out, live your life, and love it.